As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission, I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain, keep on working, open curtains. Haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. I'm never gonna give up.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHLP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Harry, to you. That voice you hear, and it kind of uplifts my spirit to hear that melodious voice from Harry, our station manager at WNHH 103.5 FM. And this morning's show, some folks might perceive it to be repetitive in that we've done a few shows on autism, but I'll do a show every day, every week on autism in terms of just we want everybody on the planet to be healthy and wise and be able to kind of bear their passions and express themselves in a free way. So today there's something called autism, and you've heard that word, but there might be other disabilities that science might discover. But today, science is also kind of directed to solving these issues and making sure that we are, if not making sure, striving fervently to ensure a better, a healthy life and a healthy sojourn for all of us. So each April, you may or may not know, individuals and organizations really around the globe celebrate World Autism Month. And it's really a means to raise awareness of what people call developmental disorders. But quite frankly, Dr. Suhodolsky, I'm thinking that a lot of us have developmental disorders undiagnosed, but that's another show. And neurodivergence. Organizations like Autism Speaks use this time to really encourage communities to stand together and to make a world of difference. And that's not just a metaphor; it really is an operating principle, so that all people with autism can reach their full potential. This morning, as I mentioned, Dr. Dennis Suhodolsky is with us, and he would join this week's show and share how his lab, and people say, well, what is a lab like a guinea pig? No, this is an innovative developmental research creative enterprise. And I hate the term lab. It kind of denigrates the content and the sincerity of what's taking place there. But his let's say his creative think tank right here at Yale is working to help teenagers with autism build emotional resilience, to help teenagers with autism build emotional resilience. So as I mentioned, our guests are Dennis, Dr. Suhodolsky, and he's a professor at Yale School of Medicine, Yale Child Study Center, and he's joined by Julia Zong. Folks forget that you may have professors and associate professors, but there are graduate students that are really so key to kind of making building success and helping out. And so Dr. Not doctor yet, but Julia Song, she's a postgraduate associate at the Yale School of Medicine and Yale Child Study Center. And we're joined by Reverend Dr. Leroy O. Perry, kind of a comrade in arms, pastor at St. Stephen's Amy Zion Church, and cultural ambassador to the Yale Clinical Research Program. You've heard me mention this term, Yale Clinical Research Program, before, and also cultural ambassador, but it really kind of brings together that innovations and creativity and scientific discoveries are to be shared, and how do we kind of also help and manifest this collective enterprise. So the cultural ambassadors to the Yale Clinical Research Program help do that, and they've been doing it successfully for more than a year. And lastly, Reverend Elvin Clayton, more than 10 years, I should say. Reverend Elvin Clayton is pastor of Walters Memorial Amy Zion Church, and also a cultural ambassador for the Yale Clinical Research Program. Everyone, let's kind of jump in, and as I say, we've done a few shows in this regard, but we're going to talk today about specifically ways to support adolescents with autism. Dr. Suhodolsky and Julia, welcome, and tell our listeners about the work you do in your creative enterprise. I'm going to use that word now, and you can use it moving forward at the Yale Child Study Center. And how did each of you become interested in this work?
Thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure. And my interest started from working with parents And I came to Yale as a postdoctoral fellow myself, so that my job was to work with families of children on the autism spectrum, and mostly working with parents, helping parents um, uh, navigate situations where their children might become frustrated or upset. And at that point, we're working with younger children. And little by little, I realized that by inviting children themselves to the table, we can accomplish so much more. So that's really started my research and clinical research and work with school-age children and teenagers, where in addition to inviting the whole family, in addition to inviting schools, we have a targeted emphasis on working with children and helping children recognize situations that might make them stressed out or upset or anxious, and building skills that I guess we're all develop one way or another. But if you have a developmental disabilities, these skills don't come naturally. So thinking about how to help children and teenagers learn the skills that they are somehow not learning naturally from their environment.
Excellent, excellent. And Julia, welcome to you as well. So share a little bit with us as well about your what's motivating you and making you get up each morning with a sense of optimism.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I guess I kind of started in this line of work in my undergraduate career at Emory University. I was working in a neuroscience lab that did neuroimaging with infants with autism. And then I kind of realized where my passions lie are working in person with kids. And so I wanted more experience with that. And then another thing that I'm really passionate about is health disparities, specifically racial disparities in mental health. And so I got to come to work at Yale with Dr. Sudolsky, and one of the best parts of working here has been like working in person and really getting to know the families and the kids that are coming in. And I've loved working and hanging out with the teenagers that come into our space. And I'm excited to hopefully keep doing that in graduate school and combining that with my passion for working on culturally informed therapy as well as racial disparity mental health research.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. We're going to take the deep dive in about 10 or 15 minutes, so in terms of your creative enterprise and your laboratory and your discoveries and your really collaboration with the community. But Dr. Sodolsky, just to kind of give us a little feel for someone that might be somewhat unfamiliar, what are some of the core symptoms associated with the features of, we hear this term autism spectrum disorder, the ASD, just
It's a very broad spectrum, and the core symptoms involve social and communication difficulties, particular difficulties in understanding social context or social emotional context, and difficulty regulating one's behavior in response to social and nuanced situations. And the second core symptom is restricted repetitive behavior. That's a little bit of a mouthful, but this refers to overly focused interests that might be developmentally inappropriate. So for example, a child might be interested in dinosaurs, but when a teenager is interested in dinosaurs and wants to carry on the conversation about dinosaurs with their peers, that could be developmentally odd. So that interests that are really deeply held, but not really productive or helpful to this person in terms of either accomplishing professional goals or fitting in socially. And the combination of these symptoms can vary in terms of their impact on the person's life. So we all have odd social experiences, and many of us have interests that are not shared by others. But the question is whether or not those symptoms interfere with a person's life and well-being. So that oftentimes the symptoms lead to emotional distress, right? So that's where we draw the line between normal and psychopathology, right? So when a person is suffering, right? So that's where we want to step in and alleviate the suffering. Or when a person's life is derailed because of the symptoms. So that these are the reasons why social emotional difficulties and restricted repetitive behaviors are considered symptoms of a mental health disorder, because they interfere with subjective well-being and quality of life.
That's, we've done some shows, but just as I heard you just explain so cogently about the emotional part, and that the person is actually hurting, and hadn't really heard that so clearly as you've just expressed it. What is which causes me to ask, in terms of the prevalence of the spectrum? I've heard people give various definitions, but what is generally, would you say, that the prevalence of autism spectrum disorders?
And the prevalence rates have been rising, with, I think, the most recent report having something like, I wrote it down here so that I'm not mistaken, something like one child per 36 children, right? So 1 per 36. And this is certainly an increase from 50 years ago, when autism was considered to be a rare disorder. So the reason for this increase is probably better recognition, better diagnostic accuracy, and also a recognition of cases that are milder, and something that probably wouldn't be considered a case back in the day.
And Julia, when you hear Dr. Sadolsky talk about the prevalence, what does that say to you? Because you're reasonably new in the field. Is it like an ominous challenge? Is it a something that you're willingly embraced? Does it kind of just to use the expression, depress you to know about these increasing numbers?
No, I don't think so, because I feel like as we progress throughout the world, neurodivergence acceptance is and neurodiversity is, I think, really important. And so to embrace people who may not necessarily fit into neurotypical norms is really important. And I feel like with new people in the field, also and working on interventions that don't treat autism necessarily, because there is not really a cure for autism. It's not something that should be fixed within someone, and accepting someone's differences and that neurodiversity, I think, is super important. And so I think with rising prevalence rates, that's not really, hopefully it's making people more mindful of accepting other people's differences and accepting neurodiverse individuals, instead of making them conform to the norms of our society.
And Reverend Clayton and Reverend Perry, just before I come to you, I wanted to ask both Julia and Dr. Sadolsky the current methods, because it seems to me that if we do this show a year from now and I ask the same question, there may even be different methods. But what are the current methods or projected methods that you think that one can use to screen for autism? In 10 years, will we take a pill and we'll diagnose, or blood kind of let us know? But what are some of the current methods used to screen? I'm sure some of our listeners would be interested in that.
Well, now diagnosis is based on an interview with a parent and on expert evaluation by a child psychiatrist or child psychologist who are experts in recognizing the symptoms in children of certain ages. And the earliest autism can be diagnosed is probably in the second year of life, based on developmental delays and lack of social reciprocity in children's interaction with their caregivers, and during the second and third year of life, lack of interest in peers. So early diagnosis is really important for early intervention, because this can set a stage for catching up and learning those important social skills. But a lot of data that we see is based, for example, the latest prevalence numbers are based on documented diagnosis at the age of 8 years, either in medical record or in educational classification, so that this diagnosis can be arrived via kind of like more nuanced assessments that include psychological testing, observation, and careful evaluation of developmental changes or lack of developmental changes, so that by the age of 8, this diagnosis could be quite accurate.
Mm, mm, mm. Just the impact of parenting kind of jumps into my mind, but before I go there, but Reverend Clayton and Reverend Perry, let's kind of weave you in. And good morning, gentlemen. Good to see both of you. And again, I know both of you have experience and know people closely, either in your church or your network, or just your even in your extended family that are dealing with this issue. And I just wonder whether we've talked about children receiving the developmental screening, but why is it important for the ambassadors to be involved in campaigns and research such as this? Because we see the issues on the Black community, et cetera. But I'm just curious your thoughts, Reverend Clayton and Reverend Perry, in this regard.
Well, good morning, Tom.
Good morning.
It is important for the ambassadors to be involved in autism awareness because if people are not aware of autism, you will never understand autism. So the awareness will help us to understand what's going on in this area. And one thing that we should understand, that autism is not an illness, it's not a disease, it's not like cancer or heart disease or asthma. So and as the doctor just said earlier, that they diagnose these kids as early as 2 years old to try to help them get the skills. And once you have autism, you have it for the rest of your life. It's not one of these things that you hear people say, oh, he'll outgrow it or she'll outgrow it. That's not the case with this, for my understanding. So it's important that we keep this before the public, that more people will understand that these young people and as they get older, they're regular people, but they have a medical condition that there's no cure for. So and we have to be conscious of the difference.
Indeed. Reverend Perry, good morning.
Good morning, Tom. Good morning, everyone. I think that the relevance of this project is self-evident in the fact that between education and accessibility, there are a number of persons in our community, in the underrepresented community, who will not have the advantage financially or socially or this accessibility to be a part of a study that would help the young people who may have autism spectrum and who may have these violent attacks, who may be marginalized in their classrooms, who may be scrutinized as mentally ill or unsociable because there's no one taking the time or opening up the door for this kind of research, which I think is valuable to where we're going in trying to work with this as an issue in our community. So, I mean, I applaud the whole project and the program. I just wish and hope that, this program will bring about a greater exposure to our audience and to members. I mean, you have to know that, medicine has always been very suspicious in our community. And the labeling within medicine has even given it even a more negative
Mhm.
connotation. So the education part that we're doing as ambassadors and what we're doing with this show is monumental. And I'm hoping that we can do more shows, that we can increase the literature, the flyers, the information, that we can put them in our churches, give them to our partners, organizations like the NAACP,
Mhm.
the League.
Mhm.
I mean, it has to be bigger than
Yes.
just, where we are right now, if
Yes.
we are really to make a dent in what we're trying to do.
And we're going to spend maybe the next 20 minutes or so, Dr. Suadolski and Julia, talking about your current study, because you are recruiting for folks, as Reverend Perry just mentioned, to kind of expand the participation. But before we do, I guess Reverend Clayton had mentioned about outgrowing autism. Would you care to comment on that? Is that a possibility, or is it just kind of a person adapting to his or her growth? I mean, people grow, but when you do hear this claim that young people can outgrow autism. Is that true, or is it just a modified statement?
Well, I think technically somebody can meet criteria for autism spectrum disorder when they're younger and then not meet this criteria when they're older. I think that the important question is what happens to this older person? Are they happy? Do they now meet criteria for a different disorder, or do they live happy and productive life and kind of free from mental health symptoms in general? So I think the optimistic number is about 10% of children who meet criteria for autism. When they grow up, they live a happy life and don't meet criteria for autism or other disorders. So that this is where we're at now. Is it good or bad? I don't know. I think we have ways to go. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Tom, can I just make a comment here?
Please. Yes, sir.
One of the issues that I think is the elephant in the room always is people's comfort level when it comes to being a part of studies like this. For example, if I went into a study like this and I saw somebody who looked like Uncle Joe or Aunt Jane, and maybe I would feel more comfortable in trying to talk to them about what's going on, rather than going into a room where I have someone who is dispassionate or may have some implied biases who I feel uncomfortable with. I think that may cause some people to turn away from a study like this. Now, Julie, you have a wonderful personality. I think I could handle it for a couple of hours, but maybe explain it to them, the process of how the interview goes. So, are they, the whole family is invited, just the particular caregivers? Is it very informal? I mean, are they made comfortable? Those are the kind of things that, when we recommend people to study, we need to know so that we don't have to hear the feedback that, oh man, I went there and they treated me like I was a second-class citizen, or that I was a subject in the study rather than a participant. So I think that's important to know and for people to know.
So thank you for bringing on this topic. So we're looking for teenagers who have autism and who tend to overreact to stress and frustration. So this is potentially a stigmatizing cluster of symptoms. And we are very careful about the topic that we study, because on one hand, this could be very impairing and very upsetting to teenagers and their families. But families might be unwilling to kind of take their child to a program that looks into like anger management difficulties. So that we think long and hard about the type of symptoms and the language that we use. In my view, this goes to the heart of autism and the challenges with emotional experience and emotion regulation. And this is the characteristic that we all have. We all get upset and we all get frustrated. And we learn how to communicate about this to our family members, to our loved ones. We are more likely to get angry with our family members than with a stranger in a supermarket. But I think autism makes it harder for individuals to naturally acquire the skills. And emotional reactions can be misplaced, or a child might miscommunicate about their experiences in a way that will place them at risk of really negative outcomes, such as high-risk behaviors, where a child might run into like a busy intersection because they don't want to go to the clinic, right? Or the child might make a verbal statement that can be misconstrued as a threat in school. Or, of course, children might become physical with their family members in school, and this could be considered a high-risk, dangerous behavior. So that we actually see a number of kids who are uninvited from educational settings or uninvited from summer camps, or kids who are loving and caring sons and daughters, but who do not have the language to communicate about their frustrations. So they can throw something, they can push someone when they're upset or frustrated. And the important part here is that these skills can be taught. And that's what we want to do in our study, so that we can reduce the risk of those situations where children are frustrated, upset, or miscommunication about their frustration.
Are the
Dr.
parents
I was wondering, there have these teenagers who at times will undress in public and act inappropriately. And would this program help a child like this? I know, like down here in Bridgeport, there was a young man that had a little difficulty, and the police were called in, and they had a wonderful program. They came in with maybe 4 or 5 police officers and with a clinician and a social worker, and they handled it in a way that was very, very appropriate. But the kids still have the problem.
Yeah.
So when do you think that this program that you have could help a child or children like this?
Yeah, I have to be careful not to oversell what we can do. So we will definitely try. We do not turn down families if we think that they have a chance of benefiting, but this is not 100% chance, right? And this is why we have to continue to do research, so that what we can do is we can come up with a focused and nuanced plan, and over the course of several weeks to several months, see if this plan can help a child to get this behavior under control. And this is not just the child, as you mentioned. This has to be the community. This has to be the family, where everybody needs to be on board. And at the very least, like sometimes this behavior, well, not just this, but sometimes behavior doesn't change. And there are times where a child needs to have a card on themselves saying, I'm a person with a disability. Please forgive my behavioral difficulties, right? So that community needs to recognize that individuals with disabilities are not always able to navigate certain situations, and unfortunate behaviors do take place.
Yeah, I wanted to,
Perry.
you know, in education, when I was in education, we used to have a program called PET, where you would give certain messages rather than, so your ways of responding or reacting to an individual was different. And I'm wondering, in this program, will the parents be given some training maybe, or some help, because they're the first responders. They're the ones ones that, you know, you wake up with, you have breakfast with, you have dinner and lunch. And if they have not some kind, at least peripheral training, I think it might hinder the whole total effort. Like you said, it's not just Yale Child Care Center and the individual, it's the community, it's the family, it's the parents, it's the people who are close by. And sometimes I don't think they know. I mean, they haven't spent years in academia learning how. They just go by gut. But there are better ways. And I think that perhaps one of the things that your study might do is to look at that as part of the healing process or the helping process.
Yeah, yeah. And so in our work, we consider our approach comprehensive therapy, so that we work with parents, we work with the child, we reach out to the schools, and sometimes those are moving parts and moving pieces, so that if children are less able to do a 45-minute psychotherapy session, we will front load the treatment with working with the families. And some parents are experts already, so they know more about autism by virtue of having a child with autism than anything that we can teach. But sometimes there are patterns or there are habits that are hard to see from the inside. And if we can offer something new or something different, this could be quite helpful. And specifically, our behavior is often motivated by emotions. And it is helpful for parents to have the tools to help their children stay a little bit more even-keeled in frustrating situations. Because a child can be in a different state of mind. They can be bored, they can be exhausted from a long day at school, they can be thirsty, right? Like dehydrated. And the child with autism might not have the skills to communicate about that, right? So that parents might need to infer the mental state of their child from the situation, from the environment, from the daily routine. And we help parents break down those elements of the situations into the pieces that can provide additional information. So that, let's say, as a parent, if I know that my kid will get frustrated on a long car ride, right? So I need to plan ahead for that. Or if I know that after a long day at school, my kid will be hungry and cranky, right? So I need to plan for that. And this planning might prevent behavioral difficulties that are more likely to occur when the child is in a state of mind when they are likely to be more easily frustrated.
Time is flying, everyone. So we have about 15 minutes. Maybe if we can just use this remaining 15 minutes, take a deeper dive in terms of the research project, in terms of how people can get involved, families and young people. Maybe talk about are there office sessions, and actually, and how long the study will continue. And and is there any cost involved to participate? Any kind of financial reward for participation? So Dr. Sadowski and Julia, kind of walk us through some of those topics as we kind of conclude, because we want to. This is so exciting, as I think you can sense from Reverend Clayton and Reverend Perry, that we want people to take advantage of this behavioral therapy for irritability and aggression.
Yeah. Well, Julia has a great way of explaining this to families. So Julia, can I ask you to help us out?
Yeah, absolutely. And to go back to what Reverend Dr. Perry was saying before, the process for what it's like for families when they come in, basically, if you feel like your child would be, or this study would be a good fit for your family, you would give our office a call or send us an email indicated that you're interested. And basically what the study consists of is 15 weeks of free psychotherapy. So that's talk therapy that can be done remotely on Zoom or in person here at the Yale Child Study Center. And a lot of families prefer Zoom just because it's more accessible and a lot easier than having to come in person weekly, and both have worked great. with our families. And in addition to those 15 weeks of therapy, we also have a few in-person assessment visits at the Yale Child Study Center in our office. And what that looks like is 2 initial 2-hour visits where we have families come in, and it can be, usually we have the parent and the child, but if both parents want to be there, if only one parent wants to be there, anything is totally fine. If a different guardian wants to bring them, that's also totally fine. And then at the first visit, we go over consent forms. So basically talking about what the study is, what participation looks like, and then we do a few assessments with the kiddos, and both parents and children fill out self-report questionnaires. So just rating things about like, do I feel upset today? Or do I get anxious? Or do I get upset about these things? And actually, there's no cost to participation. So therapy is completely free. Participation in the study is completely free. And actually, we pay you for coming in. And so for each of those assessment visits, we have 4 total, 2 at the initial point at the beginning, 1 at our halfway point after you've started therapy, and then 1 at the end called our endpoint, where we just ask families to fill out some more rating forms so we can see how things are changing over time. Since this is a research study, we want to see how things might be changing over time, see if this therapy is effective. And so for each of those visits where families are filling out forms, doing some assessments with us, families get $20, and then for each therapy session, they get $10, and it's just all paid in cash, and so that's up to $250 for completing the study.
And the number, Julia and
Yeah.
Doctor, for folks to kind of.
So the number to contact to reach out to us is would be my office phone number. So that's 203-737-7662. That's 203-737-7662. And that's for 15 weeks of psychotherapy. So that's talk therapy. Yeah.
And for how long are you, will the study last? For another year? Are you mid-phase? What's your prognosis?
I think we're about halfway through. So we have about 2 more years left. So still plenty of time.
So there's still time.
There's still plenty of time for you to call in or send us an email.
Okay. Great. So Reverend Clayton, any thoughts? Because I mean, there are a ton of questions that come to my mind, but this is just so important. If not, maybe share a little bit about you mentioned therapy, and people hear that term, whether someone thinks I'm crazy or not. But so kind of explain that from a layperson standpoint. This particular methodology, that this BTIA, the behavioral therapy for irritability and aggression, what that methodology is, or that academic support paradigm.
So when we want to change how we feel, oftentimes it's good to engage in some behaviors, right? So that, let's say, if you are feeling anxious, it's good to go for a walk. Or if you are feeling sad, it's good to do something enjoyable. And if you're feeling frustrated, right? So it's good to do something that will not get you into trouble, right? So that we're thinking about specific behaviors and specific situations that happen before and after these behaviors, in addition to our thoughts and our emotions. And cognitive behavioral therapy is kind of like an umbrella term, which refers to a very wide range of various types of psychotherapy. And our study is very focused. It's personalized and targeted in a way that we're looking for teenagers with autism. If we were looking for teenagers without autism, our treatment would have been somewhat different, right? If we were looking for adults, it would have been different. If we were looking for school-age children, we would have done things slightly different, right? So it's for teenagers, and we address specific symptoms of autism, such as rigidity or social difficulties, to make sure that the strategies that we offer to children match their motivation, their interests, and their family and school circumstances. So sometimes we work with kids who recognize their emotions, who recognize that they get frustrated easily, and they can actually think through the situations and prepare themselves and learn strategies such as relaxation or deep breathing. And sometimes we have teens who are much more impaired, so they might not recognize their own emotions. They might only know that they were upset after they lashed out at a teacher, right? So that these are the kids with whom we work on daily schedules, routines, right? So specific situations that they can use as signals for engaging in specific strategy to prevent unfortunate behavior. So I think Reverend Clayton had a question.
Yes, you're talking about these children or these teens. So the skills that are taught. But there are some cases, let's say, for instance, a child is in math class and he's having a bad day in math class, or he's having a bad day in church. So what's supposed to happen here? If he can't or she can't get themselves together, should the teacher allow the student to leave the room and go to a different place, or how do you handle that?
Well, that's a great question. So let's say the child is having a bad day in math class, right? So ideally, we want to take a couple of weeks or maybe a couple of months to give this child the tools, right, to recognize things about math that make them having a bad day. And if they're having a bad day, that they can tolerate it, right? That they don't need to kind of get up and go, or they don't need to be rude about it, right? It's okay to have a bad day. Like, what do you do when you have a bad day, right? How do you get through this day? So that this is a skill that we want to give to a kid. But not the reason autism is a separate disorder is that not everybody on the spectrum can uptake the skills, right? So sadly, there will be kids who might not be able to learn math, or who might not be able to tolerate certain situations. And then we kind of make our best judgment as to what kind of accommodations are needed, right? So is it okay for this kid when they're upset to raise their hand and take a little break and maybe go take a drink of water if they're really upset in the class, right? So that there are accommodations that can take really different forms to make it possible for the kid to get through the day in school, even when they're having a really bad, really bad experience in a math class. So this is a combination of helping children learn new things and changing the environment. If the kids are not making the best use of the situations.
Please, Reverend Perry.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I'm impressed with the eclectic way that you have integrated the therapy. Tom and I, when we were younger, we were in a Gestalt class that made kind of resemble to me what you, because you deal with the feelings, you deal with what's going on inside the person. And I preferred that over the Freudian, Sullivan, and some of the others. And I was thinking, however, that, the idea of talk time, it seems such an easy avenue for this kind of study, because like I say, once people say psych, they immediately think there's something mentally wrong with the individual, that they're going to be corrected, but it's really not that. In biblical terms, we called it just making people whole. It's like, how do you heal? How did we were the wounded healers, healing our wounds and healing the wounds of others. So it made it more universal and easier to accept. So, I'm just throwing that out at you, because I think that, if I was telling my child, you're going to have some talk time today, and it's going to be so important, you're going to love it, rather than saying, you're going to go to psychotherapy. Strap me down, because I'm kicking and fight, because I do not want to go to psychotherapy. But if you tell me I'm going to talk time, Oh, and the people are going to be so nice, and I'm going to get to share my experiences and feelings. I think that might be. So our job is to help you do your job in terms of recruiting. Okay, so by flyers, by meeting with our partners in the community through our churches, our women's leagues, our missionaries, our Christian education people. That's one of the ways we will probably be able to give support to this project, and we're definitely willing to do that.
Thank you.
And Julia, that number again for folks to call?
Yes, it is 203-737-7662.
Excellent. Excellent. Everyone, we have about 4 more minutes, and Harry's going to play the music, and that means we'll be kicked off. So let's go. Let's push the envelope. I want to throw out the term, because again, just seeing Julia and Dr. Sodolsky in front of me, you've heard this term Black rage. And it seems to me some folks of my persuasion, we've internalized that term, and that term sometimes gets manifested. So there, in a general sense, you can make the hypothesis that many Black people feel rage often and try to modulate it or treat it in a variety of ways, legally and sometimes illegally. But I'm just curious if you've thought about that phrase Black rage, and particularly since you're dealing with emotions. And when you mentioned the 2-year-old, I'm thinking of a parent that might be a young person themselves. I'm thinking I wondered if you had any thoughts about whether the societal conditions are increasing people's anxiety and their emotional outbursts, and whether that then will present itself in an autistic framework.
Absolutely, and I think that it has been a difficult time with the pandemic, and it has been an eye-opening time for us in many ways in recognizing Black rage and outrage that individuals are experiencing for all the right reasons. And the question becomes how to channel this rage towards positive change. So I think that this is what we try to do. We try to help children and families to validate emotions. Emotions are real, right? So rage is real, anger is real. And the question is, how do we help children and teenagers recognize these emotions and use them towards positive goals and productive change?
Excellent, excellent, excellent. The number again, Julia?
Yes, 203-737-7662.
Because I might modify my birth certificate and see if I can qualify as a. Come in. Any last words, gentlemen, as we proceed? Even Julia, you mentioned the term health disparities. How does that kind of intersect with what we're discussing?
Yeah, I guess quickly, research has been majority white, and a lot of autism diagnostic criteria and treatments and interventions are based on primarily white samples. And so I think research within communities of color is so important, because we want communities of color to be involved with the research process, to be able to make interventions culturally adaptive, to make sure that there's access across all communities. And so hopefully, hopefully our study will be a resource for this community and other communities in Connecticut to receive intervention, to receive therapy when it's been very inaccessible for communities of color.
And Harry, give us 30 more seconds, because Reverend Perry wants to give a closing word.
Yeah, I think that it's also important to notice that you said that you would do some of the diagnostics for some of the individuals who may not have already been previously diagnosed. And I think that's significant to know. That's a plus for people who just want to get that diagnosis in.
Absolutely. Everyone, thank you so much. We just got to do another show, Reverend Perry, Reverend Clayton, and bring you guys in. And then this has just been so helpful, and just appreciate your passion and your commitment. let's just keep hope alive and make it a reality for everyone. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you.
As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains. Haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road. Lights, camera, action, I'm ready to go. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Yeah, this is my road. Lights, camera, action, I'm ready to go. Way too long, we faced them storms. Now you gon' face the dawn you waited for. I said from night to dawn, I right my wrongs alone. In competition with warnings, ice galore. Now I'm running toward it, my lights unfinished, being a quitter. But little by little, they joking, telling some riddles. Now I'm in my section, ain't willing to give up. Know you getting knocked